Good morning, Morai Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Avodah Zarah, and we are on top of Gimel Amud Bet. Today's Amud is being learned. The Zchut Yoshua ben Dinadiana and Yael bat Rivka and Menashe ben Asi. Today's Amud is also being learned. Leilu Nishmat Tzipora bat Yitzchak. We are deep into the Agata part of the beginning of the Masechta, speaking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's dialogue between him and the lawyers, the Kol Umave Sofreha v'Chachamea, the claim of the Goyim to want Avodat Hashem, to want the schar of learning Torah. And the last stage of that was, they say, okay, you win, we want a second chance. Hashem says, well, shotim sheba'olam, you don't get a second chance. It's like you finish the test and papers up. That's when you're in the world, you could still prepare for Olam Haba. When your chance is up, your chance is up. But even with all of that, I'll give you a second chance. Mitzvah kala, I have an easy mitzvah. We mentioned that Sukkah is one of the 4 mitzvot that is shkulot keneged kol mitzvot. It is compared to all of the mitzvot combined, right? So this you remember when it becomes time for Sukkot, and you think it's hard to sleep every night in the Sukkah and to build a proper Sukkah. You will remember that this is a mitzvah that is shkulah keneged kol mitzvot. Hashem gives it to them, and then He makes it very hot. Tammuz, and each one of them comes and gives a nice kick to the sukkah and goes out. And the Gemara said, well, me and you would be patur also. Hamista'er patur min sukkah. If you're in a situation of sa'ar, then you're patur from the sukkah. So we would come out also. The Gemara says, correct, but we wouldn't give a kick. On the contrary, like the Mishnah writes, when you come out of the sukkah, you give it a kiss. You come out with hachna'ah, says the Shulchan Aruch, because it is equivalent of a servant that went to serve his master, and the master threw the water on his face, saying, I don't want your service. So it's kind of like humbling when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when He reigns in the sukkah and you become mista'er, you have to leave the sukkah, you go out with humility as though I was passionate to do Ratzon Hashem, and Hashem doesn't want my avodah. So we kind of like the rejection is taken with humility. You don't kick it out and go. You don't reject the mitzvah and go out. But rather, you go with humility, and that's the difference between Klal Yisrael and the Goyim, which really resonates with us having a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu versus just doing the mitzvot. It's very different. Doing the mitzvot or expression of a real relationship that you have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, the Gemara says, third line, on Gimel Amud Bet, Miyad HaKadosh Baruch Hu yoshev u'mesachek alehin. Right away HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits and laughs at the Goyim. Now HaKadosh Baruch Hu usually doesn't laugh. Says the Gemara, Shenemar yoshev b'shamayim Yitzchak, Hashem yilag lamo. Hashem sits and laughs, Hashem mocks them. So says the Gemara, Amar b'Yitzchak, en tzchok lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ela oto hayom. The only time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu laughs and mocks someone is that day that Hashem laughs at them and says, look, you were begging so much to have it, and now look at what you do. Even the second chance you missed in this way. And the Gemara says, Oto hayom bilvad. Only that day HaKadosh Baruch Hu laughs. Now, Ika de Matnila, there are those who learn this Rabbi Yitzchak, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu laughs, not on this Gemara, but on a different Gemara, also regarding Goyim and end of days. But not in end of days, the time of Yom Adin HaGadol, not on the great day of judgment, but a little bit prior to that. Now, I have to give a preface that it's not so clear what exactly the order of things are going to be at the end of times. When you talk about Olam Haba, Gan Eden, Tchiyat HaMetim, all of those, how exactly the order of things are going to be is not very clear. And the Rambam writes this already in several places. Rambam wrote something which became a great source of controversy, and he got a lot of push back and clash with a lot of Gedolei Ador of his time, and it was because, as he writes, they misunderstood his language, and he had to clarify it and go back and clarify it again and again 3 times until he finally wrote Igeret Tchiyat HaMetim. He actually wrote a piece dedicated towards this putting together of all the agatas of Shas about Tchiyat HaMetim and about the concept of Neshama and what happens to it afterwards and what happens at the end of times and so on. And even in that he writes these things are not necessarily very clear. And again, Rambam does deviate in some sense from the majority of the Rishonim. For instance, one of the big things is Rambam seems to not hold at all that there is going to be a guf component in Latid Lavo in Olam Haba. Ramban and other Mekubalim hold that there may be a concept of guf, but not the guf that we experience nowadays, a guf that's completely spiritual, the level of our neshama nowadays, and so on. Again, there are little nuances that are different, but nevertheless, this is a same concept in a different way that the Gemara learns. The member of Rabbi Yitzchak, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, laughs and mocks on a different Gemara. Says the Gemara, the Tanya Rabbi Yossi Omer, La'atid lavo ba'in ovdei kochavim u'mitgayirin. La'atid lavo, at the end of days, all the goyim want to become Jewish, and they come and they become gerim. Gemara says, wait a second, something seriously is wrong about that, because we need a proper Kabbalat HaMitzvot. A proper Kabbalat HaMitzvot is you subordinate yourself to all of the mitzvot for the right reasons. That means because you want to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you want to accept the totality of mitzvot. So that tells you that if you don't know someone really genuinely wants to do the mitzvot, we won't accept those people as gerim. For instance, if somebody wants to connect to the Jews because the Jews are extremely powerful and everyone is afraid of them, like the time of Esther Mordechai v'Rabim me'amei haaretz mityahadim ki nafal pachad Yehudim aleim. Many people were becoming Jewish because everyone was afraid of Jews, because Mordechai was tremendous and the Jews became tremendous. So people wanted to attach themselves to this because they were just simply afraid. That's not a good Kabbalat HaMitzvot. It's not considered a good acceptance of the mitzvot. Or time of David was the same thing. David HaMelech ran a tight ship. He was a very strong king. In his time, the Jewish government was an extremely strong government, and they conquered all the lands around Syria and other places that David HaMelech. So many people wanted to become Jewish because they were simply afraid of David HaMelech's government. In the time of his son Shlomo HaMelech, it was a different reason that caused people to want to become Jewish, and that was because Shlomo HaMelech did not need to go to war. He was such a wise man, and the economy was so booming in his time that the Jewish government was one of the richest governments ever in the history of governments. So he wanted to be part of this nation of the Jewish people in the time of Shlomo HaMelech, and therefore, in the time of David and the time of Shlomo, we did not accept gerim. Imagine the Beit Din of gerim was the basically they reverted to do other things. They did Choshen Mishpat, the other things. The gerut was not a hot thing in the time of David HaMelech because they didn't accept the gerim. So says the Gemara, do we accept gerim in Latid Lavo? If there is one time that you should not be accepting gerim, should be Latid Lavo, because everyone wants to attach themselves to this, and you don't know if they are for real or they're not for real. You don't know if the Kabbalat HaMitzvot is legit. Says the Gemara, v'hatanya en mekabelin gerim limot HaMashiach. In the time of Mashiach, we don't accept gerim. Now, you realize that in this Gemara, the Gemara just equated le'atid lavo v'diyimot HaMashiach. And this is part of Rambam's quandary. That's not so clear. Sometimes the Gemara says La'atid Lavo, and the reference is for after Tchiyat HaMetim. Sometimes it's Yemot HaMashiach. Sometimes it's Olam Haba. It's very unclear. Here in this Gemara, for now, you see that the Gemara equates La'atid Lavo. It starts with La'atid Lavo, and then it says Yemot HaMashiach. Okay, Yotzebo, Lo Kibelu, the Braita continues that just like that, Lo Kibelu Gerim, Lo Bimei David, Velo Bimei Shlomo. In the time of David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech, the Gemara says in Yevamot, Daf Chavtalet Amud Bet, on page 24, they didn't accept Gerim because in the time of David, people did it out of fear, and in the time of Shlomo, they did it out of the simple finances that made sense because the Jews were very successful, very powerful. Says the Gemara, Ela shnasu gerim gerurim. They became gerim gerurim. What does that mean? That means without having a betin, they just got like a betin of hedyotot. They took like 3 people out of the street. They accepted the mitzvot. They became gerim, and they started keeping the mitzvot. They put on mezuzah on their door and the tzitzit on their beged and tefillin on their head. They started it with a betin of hedyotot, perhaps. Umanichin tefillin beroshehem. They put tefillin on. Tefillin bezerotehem. Tefillin on their head. Tefillin on their arms. Tzitzit bebigdehem. They were tzitzit. Mezuzah bepitchehem. They put on mezuzah. Kevan sheroin milchemet Gog uMagog. Again, see how the Gemara started it, Bimot HaMashiach, and then he goes back now to Gog uMagog, which is really in the time of Mashiach, before really what we call Yemot HaMashiach. So once I see the last Milchama would be Milchemet Gog uMagog, Rambam actually, this is just a little parenthesis, it's important to understand Rambam's mentality. Rambam understands that there are 3 tasks for Mashiach. And anybody that doesn't do any of these 3, bevadai for sure, he was not or is not Mashiach. What are the 3 tasks of Mashiach? Says Rambam in the end of Hilchot Melachim. A, he has to be lochem milchemet Hashem. He is a general, he's a warrior, he is a king. He is going to be fighting milchemet Hashem. I mean, Milchemet Gog uMagog is part of the last milchama. He is mekabes nidchei Israel. He gathers all the scatteredness of the galut from all 4 corners of the world to Eretz Israel, to Yerushalayim. Uboneh et Bet HaMikdash, and he builds the Bet HaMikdash, which Rambam understands is something that we're going to be doing as a nation when Mashiach comes. Right? That's the final step of the final Geulah. We build it now. Rashi in Shas in some places says that the Bet HaMikdash perhaps is going to be coming down ready. It's a pre-made structure made in heaven that is going to be coming down. So that's actually much easier for those who are waiting for the Avodat Bet HaMikdash. It could be actually very quick. So be that as it may, the Mekabes Nidchei Israel and the Milchemet Hashem is part and parcel of what Mashiach does. So here is Milchemet Gog uMagog, and Milchemet Gog uMagog is a very scary milchama. It's not a simple one. So says the Gemara, Kevan sheroin Milchemet Gog uMagog, Omer laher, he tells them, Al ma batem. They tell Gog uMagog, Al ma batem. They say, oh, Al Hashem Al Meshicho, we're coming to kill the Jews and their leader. Shenemar Lama Rageshu Goim. This is what David HaMelech says in the beginning of Tehillim. Uleomim Yegurik. Why are the Goim all coming together and they're excited? They're coming against Hashem and against His Mashiach. V'chol echad. Again, the rest of the pasuk reads. If you take a look at the pasuk in Tehillim in the beginning, the pasuk says, "Lama ragshu goyim ulumim yegurik, yityasavu malchei eres," that all the kings come together, they gather together, verosnim nostu yachad al Hashem v'al Meshicho. They're coming against Hashem and against His Mashiach. So this is what they answer. And these gerim gerurim, these so-called gerim, V'chol echad melatek mitzvato ve'olech. They quickly take off their tefillin, take off the mezuzah, take off the tzitzit. They take their goyish passports out. They say, well, we are, we are goyim. Shenemar nenatka et mosrotemo. That they will detach and take off their signs. Nashlicha bimenu avotemo. And again, the Mefarshim say the first one is a reference to tefillin, the second one is a reference to tzitzit. But be that as it may, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yoshevu mesachek. HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that moment sits and laughs at them. Because, again, this is a test of loyalty. A test of loyalty. And the first one was by Sukkot. What do you do when things become difficult? Right? It's easy to keep mitzvot when everything is easy. Oh, when it becomes difficult, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching to see who is holding tight when things are a little difficult. And the bumpier becomes, the more credit you get for holding tight. So in the first Gemara, it was Hashem laughs when they kick the sukkah and they go out, even after HaKadosh Baruch Hu give them a second last chance. And over here in the second Gemara, HaKadosh Baruch Hu laughs at them when they have this opportunity. They had attached themselves to Yiddishkeit, and now when things become a little difficult, they just throw it all out and run for the hills. Shenemar Yoshev Hashemayim Yitzchak Hashem Yilag Lamo. So there are two ways of understanding when Rabbi Yitzchak said that day is the only day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu laughs. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Ein lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu schok ela oto hayom bilvad. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu only has schok on that day. So there are those who say this Rabbi Yitzchak was said on the Gemara of end of days when Mashiach comes. Then the Gerim, Gerorim, those who have become Gerim, they just drop the mitzvot when things become tough. And there are those who say that Rabbi Yitzchak was said on Latid Lavo when HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges the Goyim and they ask for a second opportunity. He gives it to them and then they drop it. Says the Gemara, is that correct? We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has more schok than just once in a history. In fact, Hashem has 3 hours of schok every day. So says the Gemara, didn't we learn Amar Rav, meaning Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, 12 sha'ot hayom, the 12 hours of day every day. Shalosh harishonot HaKadosh Baruch Hu yoshev ve'osek b'Torah. The first 3 HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the shefa of the Torah to the world, to the people who are learning Torah. Hence the importance of Amud Yomi, right? First 3 hours is the time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is pouring the shefa of Chokhmah in the world, because Hashem doesn't need to learn new things or remember things that He knows. So it means that this is the shefa that governs the world in the 3 first hours of the day. In the second 3 hours, Hashem is sitting and judging the world. And once He sees that with judgment the world is not going to stand, because the whole thing is going to fall apart if you come with judgment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Rachmanut. He gets up from the chariot, the Kisei Hadin, from Midat Hadin, and He moves His judgment from Din, from the Midah of strict judgment, to Rachamim, which Rachamim is different than Chesed. Chesed means you have unlimited and unconditional giving, even if the person is not deserving at all. Rachamim is a mixture of Chesed and Din, that you're giving, it's tilted towards positivity, not towards strict judgment, but it is with cheshbon, it is with calculation. It's not just pour out goodness without any cheshbon. That's rachamim. So Hashem gets up from strict din and He conducts Himself and the world with midat rachamim. Now, of course, the Torah Chaim others, they ask, what's the point? Every day Hashem sits on kisei din, and after a while He says, oh, it's not going to work. Not going to work. Let's go to Midat HaRachamim. So just to sit on Rachamim already from the beginning. Why do you have to sit on Kisei Din? You know it didn't work yesterday, it didn't work the day before. And ever since you started this, it's now been working. So at some point you want to just sit on Kisei Rachamim. This really is reminiscent of the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was building. But Tchila HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Borei Olamot u'Machrivan. Now, 974, however you want to understand, but at some point Hashem saw that it doesn't work. Shitef imo midat hachesed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mixed with the creation, midat rachamim, and now hence the world that we have is standing. So why wouldn't you say the same thing over here? The reason is very simple. That's what Torat Chaim says as well. Because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants pure, strict din to be the major hanhaga of the world. That's what Hashem L'chatchila wants. But the problem is, we are not built strong enough in order to have that. Now, certain tzaddikim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu medaktek im tzaddikim, kechut ha'sa'ara. Hashem is very strict and very close with the tzaddikim. It's more, the closer you are to Hashem, the more it is midat hadin, because that is the barometer of the creation. Real midat hadin is the real justice, which is not bad, it's good. It's just that we, as the world as a whole, is very difficult for it to stand, or it's impossible for it to stand in that way. So therefore, Hashem is meshatef midat, but He starts the day always with that, because there is a l'chatchila standard for the world. Hashem is pushing the world towards that, and again, you find this said about Bet Hillel, Bet Shammai being more midat hadin, and so on. And la'atid lavo will be all according to the din, because Hashem is pushing the world again back to a certain level of perfection, which would be with midat hadin. But nevertheless, every day HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets up from midat hadin. He says, "Okay, this is what it should have been." But we have Midat HaRachamim, and you see Yoshev al Kisei Rachamim. Shalishit, the third portion of the day, Yoshev Vezan et kol ha'olam kula. Hashem sits and He sustains the entire world. Mikarnei remim ad betzekinim. From the largest animals to the smallest ones, based on Masechet Shabbat, betzekinim is not talking about the eggs of lice, but rather it's talking about a creature called betzekinim. It's the smallest creature. So from the largest to the smallest, says the Gemara, Revi'id Yoshev Musachek im Leviatan. And on the fourth part, third 3 hours of the day, the last hours of the day, Hashem Yoshev u'Mesachek im Leviatan. Hashem has fun planning the Mashiach. Right? That's what it means. Leviatan is the animal that has been hidden away. Is the Seudah of Leviatan, the Sukkot Orosh of Leviatan. All of that is signs of Mashiach, which basically means HaKadosh Baruch Hu is planning the future, is planning how to bring the world to that level of perfection, bring about Mashiach, bring about the end of days. Right? Again, we have spoken about this in the language of Ramchal many times, that Ramchal understands there are two different hanhagot, two different pathways that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes in the world, in governing the world. One is the most immediate, which he calls it the hanhaga of schar ve'onesh, right? The reward and punishment of you do A, B follows, where you have consequence for every action, and each one of them has to be judged individually. Every person has to be judged individually, and that hanaga exists as we speak. It's a very immediate, very precise hanaga of Hashem. But then, says the Ramchal, there is a whole other hanaga, much bigger, much larger. There's an underlining hanaga of the world, not just for individuals, but in macro. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a hanhaga beneath the surface, much less revealed to us, much less felt because it's much bigger, and he calls that hanhaga of Gilu Yichud. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has this pathway he takes to bring every single piece of the puzzle of creation together in a very slow motion, following a certain path, following a certain goal at the end, all the pieces fitting together and coming together for revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's government in the world, Gilui Yichud, to all reveal in every single way how HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been always governing the world, and who, when you see the Teva, when you see the muscles of the nature, to realize who, the cover of the nature, to know and to notice whose muscles are rippled behind it, that is really Hanagav Gilui Yichud, which is much bigger, much more all-inclusive Hanagav HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bringing everything to perfection, right? So that is part of that Hanagah. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yoshev u'Mesachek im Leviatan. Hashem is planning the future. Every day, the Hanagav Gilui Yichud is bringing the world closer to that which we call the end of days. So says the Gemara. So you see, Hashem sits and is Mesachek, has fun. So you said there's only schok in the time of end of days with the Goyim, but we learned in the Braita that Hashem has fun every day. Yoshev u'Mesachek im Leviatan. Hashem rejoices with the plans of Mashiach, with the plans, however you call it, with Leviatan. Says the Gemara. We learned this from a pasuk. Second white line. Shenemar Leviatan ze yatzarta lesachek bo. Hashem, you have created this concept, Leviatan, lesachek bo. Now, this is actually very interesting, because when you go through Mishlei Perek Chet, which is from the language of Torah, you see that the Torah says, I was the schok in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu prior to the creation of the world, even, like especially from Pasuk Chavdalet and on, over there, Pasuk Lamed especially, that you see, the Torah was Shashuav Kol Hayom, was the rejoicing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even prior to the creation. So that really goes hand in hand with the concept of Leviatan, bringing the world to the revelation of Hashem, which is Torah in this world. It will be more revealed in the times to come. So says the Gemara, so that we have a kasha now. You just said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu only laughs one time in the history. Now I just showed you that Hashem laughs every day. So what do you do with that? Says the Gemara. Amar Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rabbi Yochanan says it depends. Im beriotav misachek. Hashem has rejoicing with his creatures, with the world, in a positive way. But al beriotav, Hashem to laugh at the world. Hashem never laughs at the world, never. Hashem is not like out there to get people. Hashem never laughs or mocks the creation. Hashem rejoices with his creatures together, happy for them and rejoicing with them, but he never laughs at them. The only time that there is laughing at someone is when the fakes at the end of the time, they will be revealed. Like the people who never wanted to accept, they say, oh, well, if you would have given it to us, we would have accepted. Hashem says, no, I can't do that. They say, please. He says, no, you can't. They say, second chance, okay, fine. And then they fail because it was never real. It was never real. And therefore, when you have, by the way, you see this is not time for it right now, a person has to ask a question. When you close this Gemara, I say, wait a second. Hashem gave you one chance. An easy mitzvah. Why would you kick? And the answer is very simple, because you have wired yourself in your lifetime in that way. You've wired yourself when you work on something in lifetime, it accompanies a person even afterwards. You see this in the Gemara. Rabbi Shua ben Levi went alive to Gan Eden. It's a whole story for a different time. Rabbi Shua ben Yochai says to him, he says, well, did you have Keshet, did you have rainbow in your time appear at all? Right? It's not talking about the stores, right? It's talking about the actual rainbow. And it says, yes. And it says, oh, if you had it, lo bar levayat. You're not Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Because I know Rabbi Shua ben Levi had such schuyot, because the rainbow is a sign of Hashem's anger. That's why the Shulchan Aruch says you're not supposed to gaze at the rainbow. Right? You just, when you know it's there, you make a bracha, zocher abrit, and that's it. Right? Not because it's sign that Baruch Hu is this, angry with people in the time of Noach. Hashem wanted to destroy the world. He did destroy the world, and then he promised not to do it ever again. He destroyed the world because of homosexuality and immorality and all that. It's pretty amazing stuff over here. But at the end of the day, this is a sign that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Gemara says, in his entire life there was not even once a rainbow appearing, because he had zchuyot that saved the world from Yisurim, saved the world from Hashem being even angry at them. And that's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asking them. So the Gemara said, it's not true. He didn't say the emet, Rabbi Shimon. Be'emet, in his time there was never a rainbow, but he wanted to exercise anava. Rabbi Shimon Levi wanted to exercise anava. When you ask yourself, anava in olam haba, it's already, you're going Gan Eden already. Right now, I just mentioned olam haba for Gan Eden, it goes back to the same Rambam. We're using these things in loose terms, but you see that even up there is exercise of your midot. When a person works on something, that becomes part and parcel of their mitziut. If you didn't work on it, if you didn't acquire it in your lifetime, you're going to have a very difficult time with respecting, even for once you want to put up a face to respect the mitzvah of Sukkot, you can't do it. And that is what triggers the laughter, the laughing at them, not laughing with them. So says the Gemara, that's the only time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't laugh with them, but laughs at them. Says the Gemara, the fourth wide line, only that day. Amar Lerav Acha Lerav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Miyom Shcharav Bet HaMikdash Tzchok LaKadosh Baruch Hu, speaking about Tzchok, from the day that LaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not have Tzchok at all. Umenala and Deleka Tzchok. And how do we know that there is no Tzchok from the day that Bet HaMikdash was destroyed? Either from the pasuk that says, "Vayikra Hashem Elokim tzvakot b'yom hahu lebechki ulmisped," that Hashem called out for mourning and for cry, ul korcha, and for ripping clothes and pulling hair, and says the Gemara, either because of that. Dilma, says the Gemara, hahu yom avetulo. Maybe it's only that day of the destruction itself, but not post the fact of the destruction. Ela dichtiv, but you learn it from this pasuk that says, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini tidbak leshoni lechiki im lo ezkerechi, that even post the fact of Yerushalayim's destruction says, I will always remember Yerushalayim, and if I forget Yerushalayim, tishkach yemini tidbak leshoni lechiki, the pasuk that says every chatan says under the chuppah. And the Gemara is going to now deal with this, and we're going to speak a little bit about the halachot that we have in Shulchan Aruch, actually, in Siman Tav Kuf Samech and others, for remembering of Yerushalayim and the destruction, Be'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow morning. Chazak u'baruch.